The June sun filtered through lace curtains as I finished the final line of my vows. The pen trembled slightly in my hand. I told myself it was just the caffeine, but deep down I knew better. Today was my wedding day, and my parents weren't coming. I checked my phone one last time, clinging to the absurd hope that maybe, just maybe, they had changed their minds. No missed calls, no messages, just a tagged Instagram photo from my mother, a smiling beachside selfie with my brother Scott and his wife Grace captioned, "Maui Magic," posted 5 minutes ago. That's when it hit me, not just that they had chosen not to be here, but that they didn't even try to pretend otherwise. Their seats front row center sat empty beneath the floral arch we had spent weeks designing. I had picked wildflowers for them, my mother's favorite. Now they looked wilted in the morning light, like they knew they weren't wanted either. Riley, my best friend and maid of honor, noticed me staring. She gently touched my arm. "They're the ones missing out," she whispered. I nodded, but the ache didn't fade. It was the same dull throb I'd carried since childhood, the quiet knowledge that I was never the favorite, never the priority. I had hoped foolishly that today might be different. The morning moved forward in soft waves. Margaret and Robert, my soon-to-be in-laws, bustled in with fresh bagels and lavender-scented tea. Margaret wore a deep plum dress that matched our wedding palette perfectly. She kissed my cheek, then held me at arm's length. "You are radiant, Claire," she said, her voice warm but steady. "They're fools not to see it." My dress hung in the corner, delicate lace with a vintage silhouette. I had chosen it myself, no mother-daughter shopping trip. When I sent my mom a photo weeks ago, she replied with "Grace wore Vera Wang." But this is sweet. As I slipped into the dress, Riley helped zip the back and brushed a strand of hair from my face. "Breathe," she reminded me. "This is your day," and it was beautifully, heartbreakingly mine. My bridesmaids, mostly colleagues from the hospital, gathered around with quiet encouragement and light jokes that tried to fill the silence left by my family. Then came a knock at the door. It was Robert holding a small box. "Claire," he said, his voice a little rougher than usual. "Margaret wanted you to have this." Inside was a silver locket worn smooth with age. "It was hers when she married me," he said. "And before that, her grandmother's. It's tradition now." My fingers closed around the metal, cool against my skin. I blinked away tears, then met his eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. He hesitated before continuing. "If you'd like, I can walk you down the aisle. Or not. Entirely up to you." I looked at him, this man who had known me barely 3 years but made space for me without condition. I thought of my father, who once said, "Nurses don't build legacies. They just clean up after people who do." I smiled at Robert. "Thank you, but I think I need to do this alone." He nodded, respect written all over his face. "We'll be waiting up front." And then it was time. The string quartet began to play. My breath slowed, the doors opened, and I stepped out alone. I could feel everyone watching, but all I saw were those 2 empty chairs. They weren't just seats. They were symbols of years spent proving myself, seeking approval that never came. Step by step I walked the aisle. Each footfall felt heavier than the last, but I kept moving. My chest ached, but I refused to crumble. Not today. At the altar, Ethan stood waiting. His eyes met mine, and everything else faded. His gaze held no judgment, no disappointment, only quiet awe and unwavering love. "I knew you'd be stunning," he whispered as I reached him. "But this, you're breathtaking." The ceremony unfolded like a gentle unfolding of years, our vows written in our own words, our promises stitched together by the life we had already built. When it was done and we were announced as husband and wife, the guests erupted in cheers. Still, I looked once more at those chairs, still empty, still untouched. For years I had chased something I now realized I would never catch: their approval, their pride, their presence. And maybe I didn't need it anymore. 3 years before the wedding, my phone rang at 11:42 p.m. I remember the time exactly because Ethan and I had just settled into bed after a double shift. His hand was still in mine when the screen lit up with Dad. "Claire," my father said, skipping hello, "we need your help." His voice was unusually tight, like someone gripping a rope fraying at both ends. In short, they were 3 months behind on their mortgage. The bank had sent a final warning. Foreclosure was imminent. "We've already talked to Scott," my mother chimed in a moment later. "But with Emma's private school tuition and their second property being renovated, he can't spare anything right now." Scott couldn't help. Of course, they weren't calling because I was their daughter. They were calling because I was the backup plan. Still, I listened, because that's what I'd always done. Ethan sat upright beside me, already awake and watching. I placed the phone on speaker. "How much do you need?" I asked. 25,000, my father replied, "but we'll need a cushion for the penalties, 30 total to be safe." I had been saving for 6 years, working overtime, eating prepped meals, skipping vacations to build a nest egg for a home. Not fancy, not big, just ours. Now I was being asked to drain it. "I'll help," I said quietly. "But we're putting it in writing," my father scoffed. "Claire, really," Ethan cut in. "It's a large amount. A written agreement protects everyone." There was a long silence on the line. Eventually, my mother said, "Fine, if it makes her feel better." So I drafted a simple contract: loan amount, monthly repayment terms, no interest, no strings, just clarity. We all signed it. I kept a copy in my files. And for a while they paid $600 every month, like clockwork. Each time the deposit showed up in my account, I felt something. Not pride, not even relief, just the faint hope that maybe this meant things were changing. My dad called once just to chat. About nothing in particular. It was a 6-minute conversation, but I replayed it for days. My mother started texting me family updates, what Scott's kids were up to, which neighbors had remodeled their kitchen. They were small gestures, but they mattered. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was slowly being invited in, not front and center, but maybe at the edge of the frame. When Ethan proposed, I called them that same night. My voice shook as I shared the news. "He did it at the hospital," I said, "with the kids I care for holding up signs. It was perfect." My mother's silence stretched just long enough to sting. "Thomas proposed at the Ritz," she eventually said. "Remember private violinist rooftop dinner?" I remembered. I had been there. Still, I invited her to go wedding dress shopping. She declined. "Bridge club. Every Tuesday," she said. "You know that." Margaret came instead. When I stepped out in the gown I eventually chose, she teared up and said, "Your mother is missing a moment she'll never get back." I looked at myself in the mirror that day and tried to imagine my mother standing where Margaret stood. I couldn't. As the wedding approached, the payments continued, each one a thread I clung to. Proof that maybe despite everything we were building something. A few weeks before the wedding I sent out formal invitations. My mother texted, "Got your card. We'll check our schedule." It felt vague, but I convinced myself it was just her way, that they'd show. They didn't. And now, after everything, I opened my banking app and stared at a balance that hadn't moved. For the first time in 36 months, no deposit came. June, nothing. July, nothing. I waited until the 3rd week of July before I sent a message. Subject: loan agreement, follow-up, "Hi Mom and Dad. Just wanted to flag that June and July payments haven't come through. Let me know if there's a delay or issue. Hope you're well, Claire." No response. A week later, I sent another message. Still nothing. Meanwhile, my mother's Instagram was alive and well, photos from family barbecues, captions about cherishing moments with loved ones. I was never mentioned, not even in the background. When I brought it up to Ethan, he said quietly, "Maybe this time don't wait for their side." So I printed the contract, highlighted the clause about missed payments, filed everything neatly. I wasn't planning to sue. Not yet. But something had shifted inside me. This wasn't just about $30,000 anymore. It was about the price I had paid over and over for scraps of connection. It was about not having to explain to my future child why Grandma and Grandpa never came around. It was about finally refusing to beg. I looked at the empty memo line in my bank account. Then I opened a new folder on my desktop and titled it, "The Debt They Chose." 2 weeks after the wedding, the silence from my parents stretched longer than I expected, but not longer than I feared. I told myself they were just giving us space, that maybe they felt embarrassed, or maybe ridiculously I thought they were planning some kind of surprise gesture, a late apology in the form of flowers or a handwritten card. Then the call came. I was folding laundry when my phone lit up with Mom. I hesitated, then answered. "Claire," she said, skipping pleasantries, "we need to talk." There was no warmth in her voice, only urgency, the kind of urgency I remembered from late-night calls when bills were overdue and deadlines loomed. "What's going on?" I asked. There was a pause. Then my father took over the line. "We need you to start contributing again." I blinked. "Contributing to the family," he said matter-of-factly. "Scott's business took a major hit last quarter. They're restructuring and he's at risk of losing his position. Grace had to pull the kids out of private school." I sat down slowly. "What does this have to do with me?" He sighed as though I were missing something obvious. "We're helping them stay afloat. It's what family does." "So, you stopped paying me so you could give that money to Scott?" "You're being dramatic," he snapped. "Scott has responsibilities, children, a household, social standing. You don't understand what it's like to carry that kind of weight. I gave you $30,000, I said, my voice tight, "so you wouldn't lose your home." "We didn't lose it, did we?" he replied, as if that proved his point. "You should be grateful things worked out." Something cracked in me then. A thin final splinter. "You're not paying back the loan," I said slowly, "and now you want me to give more for Scott." "It's not about him," my mother cut in. "It's about all of us. Claire, we're family, and family helps each other." I took a breath. "You skipped my wedding." "That was different," she said quickly. "It was a scheduling conflict. You knew the date for months. Thomas had arranged the Hawaii trip for the kids, and I'm not part of the family silence." My pulse thudded in my ears. I stood, walked to the window, stared out at the street. A neighbor was watering potted plants, humming to herself. The simplicity of her movement felt surreal against the storm inside me. "I'm not giving you more money," I said quietly, "and I expect you to resume your payments immediately." "You're being selfish," my father said. "We raised you." I almost laughed. Ethan walked in as I hung up. I must have looked pale because he rushed over. "What happened?" I told him, everything, voice shaking. "They're not just refusing to pay me back. They want more. For Scott." His eyes darkened. "That's not just irresponsible. That's manipulative." He sat beside me, resting a hand on my knee. "What do you want to do?" I stared at my reflection in the dark window. "I'm done waiting for them to do the right thing," I said. "I'm going to make sure they have no choice." That night, I emailed Marcia the attorney Riley had recommended. Subject line, "Enforcing a family loan." I attached the contract, outlined the missed payments, and asked for options. Marcia called the next morning. "Claire," she said after introducing herself, "I read through everything. You have a very solid case." I exhaled. "You'd be surprised how many clients I have like you," she added. "Smart, capable women who've spent years being emotionally underpaid by their own families." She paused. "Good news is those days can end." A week later, I received a letter Marcia had drafted. Professional, calm, devastating in its clarity. It outlined the total loan amount, the missed payments, the signed agreement, and the legal options available should repayment not resume within 30 days. I read it 3 times, not because I was unsure, but because I needed to absorb the weight of what I was about to do. Ethan signed as a witness. "You're doing this for every time they made you feel small," he said, "and for every time you still tried to love them anyway." We mailed the letter by certified post. That same evening, I received a message from Grace. "Grace, Claire, this is really serious. You're putting the whole family in a bad light." I didn't respond. An hour later, Scott texted too. "Scott heard you're demanding money. Not cool, sis. The kids are already stressed enough." I stared at my phone, trying to process the mental gymnastics. They wanted me to feel guilty. Again. Ethan watched me waiting. I typed one sentence back. "This is between me and the people who owe me, not their excuses." I blocked his number after that. The next morning, I opened my banking app out of habit. Still no payment. But this time, I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. The meeting was set for Saturday 4:00 p.m. at a private dining room in Riverside Grill Neutral Ground. I chose it deliberately. Not our family home, not my apartment, not even a lawyer's office. Just a clean table, 4 chairs. Nothing familiar enough for them to rewrite the narrative. Nothing sentimental to cushion the truth. Marcia came with me. So did Ethan. Scott arrived first looking annoyed, but freshly shaved like someone who wasn't sure if he was being honored or accused. My parents came 5 minutes late. My mother wore her pearls. My father didn't meet my eyes. We all sat down. "Claire," my mother began, voice clipped. "Is this really necessary?" Marcia answered before I could. "It's not only necessary," she said calmly, "it's overdue." She handed each of them a folder. Inside copies of the contract, the missed payments, and a letter outlining legal consequences if the debt wasn't repaid. Scott flipped through his folder, frowning. "What's this?" he asked. "What contract?" My mother reached for his folder. "It's just—" "No," he said, pulling it back. "You borrowed money from Claire." She hesitated. "It wasn't like that." $30,000 isn't like anything, Mom." I watched his face shift confusion, disbelief, then something close to rage. "You told me there was nothing left," he said. "You told me you refinanced." My father cleared his throat. "We did what we had to do to keep the family together." Scott stood abruptly, chair screeching. "You mean to keep up appearances," he snapped, "while you let Claire carry it all?" He turned to me. "I didn't know," he said. Not a word. I believed him. For years I had assumed Scott was the golden child because he demanded to be. Now I saw he was just better at accepting the version of reality our parents handed him. And maybe that made us both victims. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. "Would you have believed me?" I replied softly. He didn't answer. My mother's voice cut in brittle. "This doesn't need to turn into a witch hunt. Families help each other." Marcia leaned forward. "That's exactly what Claire did. And your response was to divert funds to someone else. That's called breach of contract." My father clenched his jaw. "Do you really want this to go public?" he said. Marcia smiled without warmth. "We're not looking for publicity, just accountability." I glanced at Scott. "I don't want your money," I said. "I want closure." My mother folded her arms. "And what does that look like?" "A public apology, a parade." "No," I said. "It looks like you honoring your word, and after that, we're done." Silence. Then my father said, "We'll make the payments. But this estrangement, it's your choice." For once, I said yes, it is. We stood to leave. I gathered my things calmly, as if I hadn't just restructured the foundation of my family. Outside, the air was crisp. Autumn was approaching. The leaves along the river had started to turn. As we walked toward the car, Scott jogged up behind us. "Claire," he said, "I'm sorry." I turned. "Not just for what they did," he added, "but for not seeing it. I let them make you the strong one because it was easier for me to be the needy one." I nodded. "That's how they trained us." He hesitated. "If I try to be better, can we talk?" I didn't answer right away, but I didn't say no. Some wounds need time before they stop stinging. Ethan opened the passenger door for me. As I climbed in, I saw my mother standing at the curb watching us. Not approaching, not waving, just watching. For once, I didn't care what she was thinking. Inside the car, Marcia said, "You handled that with more grace than most clients twice your age." I shook my head. That wasn't grace. That was grief, finally having somewhere to go. The payment arrived exactly 6 days after the family meeting. It was the right amount. Arrived via bank transfer, labeled August repayment, but there was no message, no apology, not even a one-line email, just money. For most people, that might have been enough, proof they were taking me seriously, that the threat of legal action had worked. But for me, it was something else, entirely confirmation. They were only doing the right thing when forced, and I was tired of forcing people to respect me. That night I sat at my kitchen table with the contract spread before me, highlighted in yellow. I flipped through bank statements, read every timestamp, every skipped transfer, every insult disguised as just how we are, and then I opened the file titled "The Debt They Chose" and added the newest entry. I wasn't going to take them to court. I already knew what I needed to do. I called Marcia the next morning. They paid, I said, but I want to restructure. To what she asked. To a lump sum, I said. I'm not interested in 30 more months of half apologies. She paused. You sure I'm done with drips of dignity, I said. I want closure, complete, clean, irreversible. She smiled on the line. I'll draft the offer. We gave them 7 days. They didn't respond until day 5. Another message. This time from my mother. Mom. This arrangement feels cold. We thought we had moved past all this. I didn't reply. Day 7 came. No payment, no acceptance. So I moved forward. My bank, under advice from Marcia, initiated a temporary asset freeze based on the missed obligations and formal warning letters. It wasn't a full legal seizure, but it was enough to lock one of their joint savings accounts, the one they used for family emergencies, vacations, and Scott's business bailouts. That afternoon, my father called. Claire, he said, voice tense. What the hell have you done? Exercised a right, I said simply. Outlined in a contract you signed. This isn't how families operate. I laughed quietly. I wouldn't know. You never treated me like family. You're doing this to punish us. No, I said. I'm doing this so I can stop hurting. There was a beat of silence. Then, without warning, his voice shifted soft, almost regretful. I didn't know you were this angry. I inhaled deeply. You didn't care enough to ask? A week later, I received the lump sum. Not just the $30,000, but with 2 years' interest voluntarily added. Marcia called me half amused, half impressed. I think you just taught them a lesson they'll never forget. I closed my eyes and let the number settle in my mind. It wasn't about the money. It had never been. But this was a symbol, and symbols matter. I didn't tell Ethan right away. I waited until after dinner when the dishes were done and we were both quiet reading on the couch. Then I leaned over and whispered, It's done. He looked up. They paid all of it. He smiled, genuine, proud, and just a little relieved. What are you going to do with it? I thought for a moment. Then answered. 3 days later, I stood on the campus of the State Nursing College where I'd studied 10 years ago. With Marcia's help, I had arranged to donate the entire sum to establish a new scholarship fund for first-generation nursing students from underrepresented backgrounds. It would be called the Claire Bennett Resilience Award. I sat with the dean, signed the documents, and handed over the check. It was the first time in months that I cried not from pain, but from peace. On the way home, I stopped by the print shop. I had one photo from my wedding taken at sunset just after the ceremony. I stood alone under the arch bouquet in hand, smiling into the horizon. No parents in sight. I enlarged it, framed it, and wrote on the back, "This is what love looks like, even when no one shows up for it." Then I mailed it to my parents. No letter, no explanation. Let them sit with it. Let it be their silence now. That night, as Ethan and I lay in bed, I rested my hand on my stomach. "I have something to tell you," I whispered. He turned, alarmed. "What is it?" I smiled. "We're going to need a bigger apartment." His face changed, shock, then joy, then disbelief. "Claire?" I nodded. "I'm pregnant." He held me close, tighter than ever. "They'll never hurt this child," he said. "I promise you that." "I know," I whispered, "because I won't let them." And just like that, I felt the first kick. Small, gentle, but undeniably real. A new life, a new legacy. One built not on guilt or obligation, but on choice. And this time I was choosing peace. The envelope was simple. No return address, just my name written in the sharp cursive I'd known since childhood. It arrived 2 weeks after the scholarship fund launched. I held it in my hand for a long time before opening it. Part of me expected another denial, another way of shifting blame or guilt. But inside was different. It wasn't from my mother or from my father. It was from Margaret, my aunt, my mother's older sister, the only one who'd ever stood up for me in hushed ways that didn't make headlines but mattered anyway. "Dear Claire," I saw the article about the scholarship, your name in bold next to the word resilience. It felt right. I've been meaning to write for a while, but your mother asked us not to get involved. You know how that goes. I want you to know I was proud of you long before this. Before the lawsuit, before the wedding, before all of it. I remember the summer you stayed behind to work at the clinic while the rest of the family flew to Europe. You didn't complain. You never did. That strength, it's always been yours. They just never chose to see it. Your parents are complicated. But even complicated people sometimes feel shame. I don't know if they'll ever say it, but I believe they regret what they did. Not because they've changed, but because they lost you. And you gained yourself. That's the kind of inheritance no one can burn or freeze or forget. If you ever want to talk, my door is open. No sides, just tea cookies and the niece I wish I'd spoken up for sooner. With love, Margaret. I reread it 3 times. It wasn't an apology from the people who broke me, but it was something just as rare, a voice from the sidelines stepping forward. A quiet truth finally spoken aloud. I put the letter in the drawer with the ultrasound photos. Side by side, 2 kinds of proof that I had come from pain and that I had made something beautiful from it. A few days later, I walked past the old family house. It was a habit I hadn't quite broken. The porch light was on. Wind chimes danced in the breeze. I didn't stop. I didn't look long. But I left something on the mailbox, a small envelope. Inside, a copy of the scholarship pamphlet with 1 sentence written on the back. You taught me silence. I turned it into strength. No name. No return address. Just closure. That night, Ethan asked me what I wanted to name our daughter. I smiled. Autumn, I said. He blinked. After the season. After the shift, I replied. After the moment everything starts to change quietly before the world even notices. He nodded. It's perfect. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or revenge. It slips in on tiptoes when you're holding your baby's hand or walking past a place that used to hurt and realizing it doesn't anymore. It happens when you stop needing to be chosen because you finally chose yourself.